Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be reviewing factoring. So we're going to be reviewing all of the factoring methods you have learned in your previous courses. Factoring is the opposite of multiplying expressions. We use factoring to solve equations and simplify expressions, and it is one of the most important skills we learn in math. It's your job to know all the different methods of factoring and be able to recognize when to use them. The first method we're going to be going over today is the greatest common factor, or the GCF method. In this method, we're going to take a look at what we're trying to factor. So in example 1a, I have 2x cubed minus 4x squared. So I would look at each term and ask myself, what factors do they have in common? So if I look at the 2 and the 4, my GCF is a 2, and I have x cubed and x squared, so the GCF is 2x squared. So this is my GCF, and then I open up a set of parentheses, and now I'm going to fill it in with what's left. So I would have x minus 2. And really, you could just think, you're dividing it out, but you just think about what you would have to multiply by to get the 2x cubed. What you would have to multiply that factor by to get the 4x squared. So this would be your final answer. In example B, I have x cubed minus x squared plus x. So my GCF for all three terms is going to be an x. I would factor that out and then open up a set of parentheses and combine and write what's left. So I have x squared minus x plus 1. And now some of you may be saying to yourself, you'd always try to look to see if you can factor this, right? This is a trinomial, which we're going to work on later on in this lesson. But really quickly, if you think about it, you'd look to find two numbers that multiply to 1 and combine to give you -1. That is not going to happen. So we call this factor prime. So our answer here would just be what we got originally. Now we're going to look at a difference of two squares, or dots method. Each term must be a perfect square, and there must be a minus sign. Okay, so you're looking for a perfect square and a minus sign in between. Our rule here is a squared minus b squared equals a plus b times a minus b. In example 2a, this one is really obvious. Okay. So the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 4 is 2. So we would just set up x plus 2 and x minus 2. The next example is a little tricky, because you would say in 36x squared and 9, yeah, I would have 6x and 3. However, if you notice, I have a GCF here. So always GCF first before you begin a problem. So I'm going to go back up to the original. And my GCF between 36x squared and 9, I can factor out a 9 to begin this problem. And I would then be left with 4x squared minus 1. And now inside here in these two terms, I have 2x plus 1 and 2x minus 1. So this would be factored completely. Okay. The next method of factoring I would like to review is the sum or difference of two cubes. Most of you will remember this as the SOAP method, and SOAP stands for same sign, opposite sign, always a positive. So we're going to use this method whenever we have the sum or difference of two cubes. Notice I could have a plus in between or a minus this time, but as long as my two terms are perfect cubes, I can apply my formula. And basically what it breaks down to is you're going to take the cubed root of each term in the expression, and you're going to form a binomial out of that. and that's going to have the same sign. And then you're going to take make a trinomial. And that's going to be the first term squared, opposite sign, first times second, always a plus, and then the last term of the binomial squared. So if we go to the first example, x cubed plus 8. In my head, I would say to myself, the cubed root of x cubed is x. The cubed root of 8 is 2. So I'm going to make this a binomial, x plus 2, same sign. Now I'm going to make my trinomial, and I'm going to work off my binomial, the first term squared, opposite sign. Now first times second, always a plus, and my last term squared. And this would be our factored form. You will never be able to factor this. Okay. This factor, the trinomial, is prime, so you would be done with the problem. This is the factored form. Now let's look at the second example. The cubed root of 27x cubed is 3x. The cubed root of 64 is 4. So you would set up your binomial. 3x, same sign, minus 4. Now you would work off your binomial, first term squared. So you have 9x squared. Opposite sign. First times second, 12x. Always a plus. Last term squared, 16. And once again, you would be done because you can never factor the trinomial. The next method we're going to look at is factor by grouping. And you're going to use factor by grouping when you have more than 3 terms. Okay, so I would always, look at what I'm dealing with first. And the steps here, if I want to factor x cubed minus 4x squared plus 2x minus 8, I want to group the terms. Okay, so that means I'm going to kind of break these up into 2 groups. And then I'm going to factor the GCF from each group. So I look at x cubed minus 4x squared, and the GCF is x squared. And I'm left with x minus 4. And in the second binomial, my GCF, my sign is plus, my GCF is 2, and I'm left with x minus 4. And now what you're going to do is you're going to factor this GCF from each group. X minus 4. And then I combine what's left, my x squared and my plus 2. I combine what's left as a factor. And now I have factored form. Let's look at the next 2 examples. I'm going to group my terms into groups of 2. Look at the first group. GCF is x squared. I'm left with x minus 2. I look at my second group. In this case, I'm going to factor out a negative 9. And I'm left with x minus 2. My GCF is x minus 2, so I factor that out. And then I combine what's left. I combine what's left, x squared minus 9, as a factor. But now I see I have a dots in there. So I have x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 3. You always try to factor as much as you can. Let's look at this next example here. X to the fourth plus x cubed plus x plus 1. We're going to group our terms, factor out our GCF from the first group, x plus 1. Bring down my sign. Now in the next group, it doesn't look like I have a GCF, but there's really a 1 there. Okay. X plus 1. Factor out my x plus 1. I'm left with x cubed plus 1. Now I have a sum of 2 cubes, so I have to continue on. X plus 1, x plus 1, first term squared, opposite sign, first times second, always a plus, last term squared. You could leave your answer like that, or because you have the same exact binomial, we can write it as x plus 1 squared times x squared minus x plus 1. And this would probably be the preferred answer. Last but not least, trinomial factoring. Trinomial factoring is when we have ax squared plus bx plus c. Some of you recognize these as quadratics, right? Those are our parabolas, so to speak. The first type of trinomial factoring, the easier type, is when a equals 1. Okay. In this type, we're going to use the AM method or the double bubble method. We're going to set up 2 sets of parentheses and find 2 factors that multiply to c and add to b. X squared minus 2x minus 8. Double bubble. Now remember, we want to multiply to c and add to the middle term, to the b. So we're going to put an x and x. 2 numbers that multiply to negative 8 and combine to give me negative 2, minus 4, and plus 2. So I'm moving through this lesson like you already know how to factor. Okay, so if you need, extra help, let me know, please. In the next example, I have x to the fourth minus x squared minus 6. Okay, this one's a little different because of our x to the fourth, so we have a little bit of a challenge here. When I set up my parentheses, instead of putting an x in the first spot, I'm going to have an x squared. Because remember, if we were working backwards and foiling this out, we would do x squared times x squared. That would give us the x to the fourth. Now I think of 2 numbers that multiply to negative 6 and combine to give me negative 1. And those numbers would be negative 3 and positive 2. And there's your final answer. Okay. Our next method is the tricky trinomials. This is when our lead coefficient is not 1, when we have a number out in front. These are a little bit harder. There's 2 methods we can use. The first method is the bridge or the rainbow method, and the other method is the split the middle method. So I'm going to review each method and let you decide what you're most comfortable with. So in the first method, the rainbow method, we multiply the first and the last term. So I kind of make a little rainbow or a bridge, whatever you want to call it. Multiply the first and the last term, I get a 6. Now I'm going to set up 2 sets of parentheses. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first number in each. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put the 2x and I'm going to put a 2x. Okay. We're cheating a little bit here. We're changing things a little, and we're going to take care of it later. Now I want to think of, I don't know how to get rid of this. Okay. So now I just want to Think of two numbers that are going to multiply to -6 and +6 and combine to give me 5. So those two numbers are going to be a +3 and a +2. Next, we're going to divide out the extra factor. Okay, this step is important. We put the 2 in the beginning to help us. Now we have to look at the factor that's divisible by 2 and divide it out. And that's our end result. The split the middle method. Okay, I'm not very good at this method, so I hope I don't make a mistake. I usually use the bridge method when I do my tricky trinomial factoring. However, I'm going to try to do this as best as possible. So if we're trying to factor 4x squared minus 13x plus 3, we start by multiplying the first and last term like we did in the previous example. Okay. Now we're going to set up ax squared plus blank plus blank plus c. This is our split the middle. So I'm going to set up 4x squared. I'm going to kind of leave spaces, and I'm not going to put signs in right now because I don't want to mess myself up. And then I'm going to end with the +3. Okay. So I want to now think of two numbers that multiply to +12 and combine to give me -13. So those two numbers, they're both going to be negative because I get a positive value. I think -12x and -1x. Okay, so those are going to be my split the middle. Okay. Now I'm going to do factor by grouping. So I have my first two terms and my second two terms. In the first group, I can factor out a 4x, and I'm left with x minus 3. In the second group, I bring down the sign, factor out a 1, and I'm left with x minus 3. You should always get a GCF when you do factor by grouping. You should always get two binomials that are the same. Factor out the x minus 3, combine what's left, and there you have it. You have your factored form. Okay, so whichever method you prefer, do your homework and practice, and you can decide for yourself what you like to use. I hope everybody got a quick review of factoring, and we will join together again.